Today's episode is going to be centered mainly around the UK, and a lot of the topics are basically fan suggestions. Basically, we had a couple. Well, actually, had one request from a fan to basically cover a couple topics. So shout out to Dino, who was the guy who sent us over some topics. So the first topic we're going to cover, and is one that he suggested, was basically talking about the golden era of mixtapes in the UK. This is around maybe like 05, 06 to about 2013, 2014, when kind of mixtapes were kind of all the rage. They were getting dropped on a very mad level, like back then, like loads of different like people who were setting pace all around London, all around the UK. And it's something that hasn't really been documented all that much as far as like history in the UK. And it is a very important part of like rap in this country's history, as far as like before the scene kind of blew up, like post like That's Not Me, German Whip, Shut Down. There was that period of time where, you know, there were a lot of like underground rappers dropping a lot of heat. And yeah, we kind of just want to shine light on that today. I do want to send a shout out to Mic Check, which is a publication that actually named us one of five upcoming podcasts. They've actually big up Mic Check. They actually did a piece on this era of UK rap, so shout out to them. I'll drop a link to the article in the descriptions. But yeah, boys, golden era of mixtapes in the UK. What a time. What do you remember of it?
It was dark.
Oh wow.
Wait, what? I think if we're looking at like, commercially, it was a very dark time, because I think it feels like that's when everyone was attempting to blow. It feels like that's when the Rolex sweeps were coming out, and you're seeing Tinchy and Tyro Cruz doing their thing and that. If the timeline's correct.
Sunglasses at night.
Yeah, man. So it felt like a pretty dark time, like on a mainstream level. Underground though, I think I had actually checked out. So I kind of missed the golden era. I had to go back. But I remember a lot of, because I think we're looking at like 08, 09 times, which is when I was getting ready to go to uni and that. Yeah, man, that was when road rap was really becoming like a proper thing. And yeah, man, you can definitely see the influence from what was happening then to what ended up happening now, as far as like the drill and that. But yeah, I was late though on like the actual road rap thing and like the golden era of those mixtapes. And a lot of the tapes that I think would be considered within the golden era, and I even questioned when the golden era was. The ones that I would have put in it, from what I've seen online and stuff, weren't put in it, because I would have put like a retrospective by Wretch within that, but it wasn't really listed like that. So it's kind of interesting on how you guys identify with what the golden era even was.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like different strokes for different folks. I think generally around the time when grime was basically popular, and then people were starting to transition to like kind of more electro pop, like Skepta, Tiny, Tinchy and all that. That then kind of left a void where that kind of like underground grime scene kind of was. And even though it was still going P Money, do you know what I mean? There was also this void for kind of more, I suppose, street rap at the same time. And then that's where people like Joe Black, people like Squeeks, people like that kind of fill that void. So Koke, they kind of fill that void. So I think the golden era, you could really put it, I kind of put it as like between like 06, because then you have like Wiley Tunnel Vision, you have like Rough Squad's Guns N' Roses collection as well, to about 2014, where, you know, Tion Wayne's dropping Wayne's World, Scrap's 80s Baby, Nines, and all the Church Road stuff as well.
I think it's different.
I had two though. I had two.
The era in conversation is where this has to start. Because to your point,
you've got to split. You got to have that split.
Because
I don't look at Joe Black and Nines.
Yeah, and
as the same, that makes sense.
In that first era as well, there was a lot of like the absolutely essential compilation mixtapes as well. So you're talking about like Lord of the Decks, Lord of the Mics, Risky Roads, all of them as well. And they were circling around the same time. Guns N' Roses from Rough Squad and them man were also doing their thing. And don't forget as well, like none of the artists who went on to then be big had been really signed yet at that era. So that's kind of what all their output was for the most part, right? They all had mixtapes before, like Kano then had Home Sweet Home and the like. So that era, I think, is completely separate to what then came in that second generation of mixtapes before the big corporations then said, you can't use our beats, and the mixtape era died a slow death.
Two one way to put it.
I would have given it from like '08 to like 2011.
Now look at
For
it. Sorry.
No, go on.
I was gonna say it's more. I was gonna say '06, and the reason why I say it's '06 is because I remember like around year 10 times we were still using LimeWire to download whatever we needed to, and then the website just started building.
Too early, man. Too early, bro. Because I feel
what was 06, year
how do
10?
you define a golden era?
I
mean, when it was
A
at its
period of time
when
where
it was
the
a
best
pinnacle,
stuff come out.
it was just start.
And I think I agree with the whole first golden era, second golden era, because the first golden era is kind of more like grime, Rough Squad, and all that stuff, Tunnel Vision, Wiley, and all that. And then the second era is road rap, and it's like Tion, it's Nines, it's if you want to put like people like Benny Banks and all that, like you could probably put that in that.
I would
era
have
as
still
well.
said they were a bit before.
Say that
Because what I've got,
They're probably the first.
Yeah, no, they were better than
the
they were
first
before
generation.
Tion.
Gigs was Gigs
yeah.
was 07, right? Gigs and Hard Bodied was
But Gigs and Roadside, they
Yeah.
were the same generation.
that was like 07 times. So I don't look at 07 and a Tion. There's no way that's the same.
No, but I'm saying
Yeah,
like,
they were, but that's where it becomes a bit techie for me because in my mind I've got them a bit before. I've got
Say
Roadside
that
G's
again, say that
before
again.
Gigs, just a little bit. And I feel like when Gigs really started dropping the tapes that would influence things later, for me that's where I mark it by that year, and that was like around 2007. That's why I wouldn't have put Roadside G's within that because I feel like they were kind of doing it just a bit before. Do you know what I mean?
That's fair.
I'm just trying to Google when Roadside G's dropped their first tape because I'm pretty sure it might have been even before. It might have been like 05, 06 type time.
I wouldn't have counted that as golden era though, man, because I feel like they were the only ones really doing
05
it
I wouldn't count.
to a high level.
Like I know Blade Brown and Gigs made, was it 07?
Yeah.
I think that's a
That's
golden
to
era,
me.
though.
That's when. You said 07.
Yeah,
didn't you?
I would have said.
I think 07
yeah.
retrospective, and that's when it started bubbling.
I
Around
don't include
07.
retrospective in that though.
What year did retrospective come out? 08? Because it's first year college times.
Oh wait, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
I would have
still within the
said-
same
No,
vicinity.
because I'm thinking of road rap.
Yeah,
Oh,
but we're talking
road
about.
rap, that's
I'm
probably
thinking
like,
of specifically road
But
rap.
we're talking about
right,
mixtapes in
that-
general, though.
So you want to be inclusive and
I'm
add
talking about,
all
when I'm
of
talking
them.
about mixtapes, I'm talking about just when mixtapes.
Well, like I said, like the first golden era, like maybe
Yeah.
like 06 to 08 was probably more grime.
Yeah.
And then maybe 08 to like 2013, 14. That's more. That's more road
696
rap.
when 696 got ground the fuck out of here, it
Precisely.
became a rap thing, innit?
Yeah, exactly. So I'd probably say that. And in between 6 and 8, you have Gigs and Hard Body. You have the grime stuff as well. And then you have more of the people who do repping road rap a little bit later in like 08, 09 to about 13, 14. So I think if we're going to do it that way, I think that's the more accurate way to do it because there was a shift. Obviously, as grime heads went more poppy, and then there was more real rap to go around, and that's when the second era kind of comes in.
That makes sense.
But
07 was the first year I could remember, though. Teacher Training Day came out that year, so I get what you mean. You just got to depend how you divvy it out.
yeah, but I think that era was more so defined by road rap, as far as like, as far as how much
Definitely.
was being released and how many artists came through at that time. So I think if you're gonna call it that, then that's like fairly accurate because there were a lot there. I mean, I haven't in anywhere near scratched the surface of that era. I'm still working my way through it. What are some of kind of your favorite like artists or mixtapes from that era? Because a lot of them, especially now in the age of streaming, where a lot of these mixtapes aren't even on like Spotify or streaming services, it's a lot harder for you to obtain them. It's kind of a thing where you kind of had to be there, sort of thing. You being at the market, buying physical, CDs and playing them like that. So it was very much a unique time as well because we were still depending on that kind of way of spreading the word and consuming the music. So who are some of your favorite artists from that time?
I remember retrospective that made a massive impression on me.
Be Cool was on that, innit?
Yeah. And I think just from my friends, because a lot of these artists I weren't really into, apart from like Gigs, I weren't really into the others. But the people I had around me, they were heavily into like the Joe Blacks with Billionaire and Benny Banks from Patiently Waiting and Young's Tef and Blade Brown and that. And they all, from what I've been told, they all dropped like pinnacle mixtapes around that time, and that's why I was referring to like road rap and wanting to specify more on road rap.
No, I agree with
because
you, I agree.
It seemed like all of them man were just coming out around the same time. Well, not even coming out around the same time, but releasing like important bodies of works around the same time, and that's why, like you said, I think I kind of note the golden period from that particular period. But yeah, some of those tapes were Yeah, very, very important. I think for what is even going on today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would. Sorry.
No, could you?
I was gonna say, yeah, I echo everyone you said. The one mixtape that always, it's gonna sound typical, innit? But I remember literally the 07 Teachers Training Day Wretch. And Teachers Training Day was the first mixtape I think I heard. And it came out 07. I was like, this is fucking phenomenal. And he had a, remember Punctuation? Where you had someone who just going to do the that was on it as well. And I was like, yeah, this is alien. So I'll say, yeah, 07, 08. That's when I really started getting into it.
Gigs Walk in the Park, man.
Yeah.
Oof.
Walk in the Park. Like everybody talks about Talking the Hardest, obviously is his biggest song, but like there's a song in there called
Yeah,
which
I
for
remember that one.
me was the single greatest
enough.
like, road rap song ever. Like honestly, every single time I heard it, I'd want to smash everything around me. Like
Sounded scary.
he was scary, and it was close to home, innit? Because we knew him, we knew his family, we knew all the stories. Like, so it was super close to home, and it felt even more authentic for that reason. But yeah, definitely scary. But that for me was a huge moment. Nothing really was the same. You had some like artists like, I think that was around the time when like Young's Teflon was really doing his thing as well. He was coming through as well. I can't remember the name of his first mixtape, but shout out Bolla, but he was like early on it, Young's Teflon. Used to tell me about him. But at the same time, around that time, you still had people like Kano like dropping like mixtapes, which
Beats
were
and Bars.
beats and bars and all of that stuff, which were amazing. I remember he did a couple of songs which didn't actually find a home in terms of like an official mixtape, but he just like dropped some amazing videos for. There was that amazing song that he did with like Wretch and Wiley and Scorcher, which was
later.
called.
I think that was later.
What was it called? Shit, but no, I get it. But like around that time where there were a lot more Lucy's as well. But yeah, for me, like the one that sticks out is Gigs Walk in the Park. If we're talking about that first era, I was obsessed with those those grime compilations. I was obsessed, right? Like Lord of the Decks Volume 3, for example, where you'd get like one-off Lucy's from artists like Scratchy, and you'd get like that Sidewinder track, which basically had everyone like Wiley on it. You had Rough Squad on it. People like Shifty got a little 8-bar on there from Rough Squad. I loved those compilations. And shout out how they packaged it back in the day as well, because it was like the DVDs, so you could watch the battles, and you get the CDs as well. It cost a little bit of money, but like shout out anybody who's still got one of those as well, because they should be worth quite a bit. But yeah, for me, that second era, for me, was pretty much dominated by Southeast London.
No, the second era was probably South for me, because that's when I became a massive Jar Jar Soul's Head. That was part of that 2011.
PDC, man. Shout out
The illegal
PDC.
download. That's when I became a heavy Jar Jar fan.
Yeah.
So that was the second. I was very much Tottenham. That first, because it's all you know.
Shock.
So that no, but it's all you know. The same way you listen to gigs, it's because
Plus,
it
North
was
London
local.
were doing bits.
Yeah,
Joe
well,
Black,
it's-
Benny Banks.
It's normal. I'm joking. But you get what I mean, though. The first when you first find out about something, it's very much locally who's making noise where you are. And then when I heard Jar Jar Souls, I remember that second time was stupid. I know it was stupid, because I believe everything he said as well.
So what do you think made that era so special?
It was authentic.
Yeah.
Everyone was hungry.
Yeah.
Everyone was hungry. It was very much an authentic, accurate depiction of their circumstances, and people felt it. People very much felt it.
They felt you're right, but I'll take it one step further. Having to chase these mixtapes down, having to search for these mixtapes, having to source them through like random means, having to have your 56k modem struggle through like downloading.
Bro, it was a
them,
drug deal.
meant that when you had it, you valued it.
I know, it's nuts.
And you bumped it. You forensically understood the album from the start to the finish. Every bar, when every single feature comes in, like the connection that we had to the music then was just
different.
completely
Do you
different.
remember how you had to burn a CD to give it to someone else?
Literally.
You had to burn it
You
to
had
give
to
it
be
to someone. Are you crazy?
invested. You had to be invested in your artists and their albums and stuff back then, because otherwise you just weren't gonna hear that shit. So I think that's what made it. That's what made it, because it was just like you felt like, and like, this must be what it felt like in the at the start of hip hop.
Yeah,
in New York, where you're like, hey, you heard this tape? Give the guy a tape, and then they come back to you next week because they ain't got mobiles or anything. Like, yo, that tape you gave me, that's kind of what we.
That's what we
liken it
lived.
to.
We lived.
You know what I mean?
We lived that.
We were able to go home with our CD. We had a CD player. We'd play it at home when our parents went to church or whatever, because we couldn't listen to that ridiculous music in the house. But we really we took it in, man. We breathed it. We lived it. I think that's what made it important.
That kind of analog era that kind of caught lightning in a bottle, in a sense of like being so close to these people that we consider like legends now, and they were doing their thing like on the roads, like all that stuff, as far as like shifting the music and just basically being very, very productive as well. Like no label, backing, no nothing. Just going to a studio, spitting bars, dropping the tape, and that's it sort of thing. So it was very much that kind of fervor around it that kind of created a buzz. And to an earlier point you made, I feel like it very much was like early building blocks for what the scene would become. Because a lot of like statements were made in that era, like Hey Coke, Jay-Z signed him, sort of thing. And that kind of opens up the idea of like kind of more like cross-national like link-ups and stuff. Benny Banks did a song that was on the Fast and Furious soundtrack sort of thing. So there was strides being made, even if those names aren't necessarily as big as they maybe should be. But they were opening up the possibilities for what could happen.
It was kind of a blessing in disguise as far as like the labels not really like making it easy to be signed, because it meant that you had to be hungry and you had to really care about your craft and hone your craft on that. And I think it's actually, looking back now, it's like, all right, it was probably good that the scene kind of weren't really fucking with a lot of
we
the
needed
artists.
that.
But the thing is, though, like when you really think about that era, though, when you think about the people who actually managed to get to the commercial level,
It took a minute, bro.
but as far as like a representation of like who the best underground rappers were, it's not like they picked the most commercially viable people. Kano happened to be like this pretty boy who could spit ridiculously. Yeah. But he was still one of the best. Yeah. Tingy Strider was still phenomenal. So the people who actually went to the commercial level were actually some of the best in the scene. So it was actually nothing to really be ashamed of. But the problem is that they were forced to make the type of music that they made. So like, I think looking back on that period, obviously it's unfortunate the music that came out, but what I will say is that like commercial rap at that stage was very much in its infancy. They didn't understand it, right? They didn't trust the artists to make the type of music they wanted to. But one thing that we can look back on with pride is that like it weren't no Mickey Mouse artist that went through. Even Tiny Tempo, who was arguably the biggest one during that time, still had some smashes on the underground. You know what I mean? Like White Freedom and all of that. He wasn't
Chip as well.
Yeah, Chip. You know what I mean? Like Chip is still to me like one of the best grime rappers ever. Like one of the best grime artists ever. But yeah, like it's I don't look back on that period as like one of embarrassment. I feel like I think that's actually a vital part of the history.
I think
it's a vital piece.
I think it's one of the
Skepta got through as well, but and again, look at Skepta now.
It's one of the biggest benchmarks.
They didn't actually make mistakes. Yeah, like, they didn't actually make mistakes with the people who made it. Like because they're still now the legends.
I think it's almost, you know, when you just hear stories from back in the day. It's like you said, if it was in America in the early 90s. Like I remember grabbing teachers training day off Rich, Saturday going MPK to play football. Rich and Scorcher are there.
Bro, I play football with
Bro,
Scorcher as
do you know
well.
how nuts it is? I'm going to my school to kick ball for banner on a Saturday, and I'm listening to this guy's mixtape the whole week. And it's almost like, yeah, you might have just right here. But it's because it was still in its infancy stage, and seeing where he is now and where Scorcher is and how we revere these guys. I look back at it with pride, man. I'll be honest with you, like, to say you was there at the start of something, you've got to appreciate that.
Bro. So how do you, man, judge like artists like Krypton Conan, for instance, and they had like I think Red Rum Volume 1 back in.
To be fair, we didn't mention them and all of us.
Yeah, back in like back in like 08 and that. But when you look at what they went on to do as far as the type of music they were making, do you look at them with a bit of a slight? I think that speaks to a wider point as far as the music you're making when you're hungry to get signed on the mixtape grind and that, and then the music you end up making when you start making the album. Why do we look at it as a bit of a slight when sounds get diluted a bit more, or maybe the music just isn't as good, or the skill isn't as good?
I just want to start by saying shout out Krypton Conan, who've managed to get out of their deal.
Yeah, big up.
After going low for a few years.
And after 9
label
years.
fuckery is no joke, so shout out them.
For real.
What you were saying?
I think with Krypton Conan, I think they're a very special case because although, you know, obviously Freak of the Week and, you know, Don't Waste My Time, I feel like listening to their music before and after, it's all kind of in the same world. I don't think they really had to. Yeah, I don't think they really had to change much.
Nah, if you look at G,
I think it's like they took stairs rather than they like climbed up a flipping ladder at 100 miles an hour sort of thing. I think it was a slight progression rather than just be like, I'm making grime one day and I'm doing flipping Rolex sweep the next day.
But they've always stayed within the same, it's like you said, within the same realm.
Yeah.
If you get what I mean.
Yeah, and they've done that while breaking records.
Yeah, like, I've never looked at them and thought you've took a complete left turn. I've always kind of looked at it.
Yeah,
stay where you're comfortable.
I think they're a special
That
case.
Otis, man.
That Otis
freestyle. Remember that weekend? That was a moment.
They beat the original Views. Supposedly,
yeah,
and then they had to remove it.
Yeah.
And then because they beat the original,
did so well,
they
it
removed
caught the attention of.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And they were like, "Yeah, take this down ASAP."
Yeah.
Because I remember Krypto, one of them had a mad
And it was
bar. He's like,
all
"Do the
because
math."
And it was literally all because they hit the option monetize. So you know when you upload a video, you can say this is open for ads and this is not open for ads. You can choose that as the uploader. Because they went monetary,
that's why they would like to take it down.
that's why they got screwed. Because back in the day, then you still weren't. It wasn't really as strict on copyright infringement. And again, they're like UK rappers. They're not looking out for us. You know what I mean?
But I didn't catch Crypto Conan off a mixtape. Just seeing as we're talking, the first time I caught Crypto Conan was the Thing freestyle. Was it Link Up TV? Where they're doing a freestyle damn near a decade ago, and I feel like it was the freestyle that really crossed them over. But as a freestyle, that's the first time they came across.
I caught them early when they were like Gypset and things like that, man. I caught them very
I
early.
caught them late. Not even late. I caught them like
You and Emmanuel,
a decade.
Emmanuel got onto Crypto Conan early.
Yeah. Sneakball as well.
Yeah.
Sneakball needs his props as well for this era.
He's this generation.
Because he was doing something. He was kind of doing road rap, but he was kind of also doing his own thing. It was the jet ski wave, right? He was kind of doing his own
He's
thing.
their Chief Keef. Don't know if that makes sense, but it made sense in my head.
I feel you.
I hear it.
No, I hear it.
It made sense in my head.
No, I hear it. I do hear it. But yeah, I think they're very much a special case. But
there is something about the transition from mixtapes to albums that is. I
Is it
don't know,
'cause
man.
is it
There are
'cause your fans
there are just no rules when you make a mixtape.
and it's your fans get bigger.
There are no rules.
Do you know what I mean? Like, say if you're selling 200 mixtapes, then your album does 100,000.
Yeah.
You know how many fans now you've got?
Yeah. Like, and there are no fundamentally in the actual creative process. You want your album to be much more glossy, much more elevated, much more professional sounding, much more commercial. Everything to be more concise, tracks to be shorter, etc., etc., etc.
And you want to sell more.
Like you want to sell more. So like, yes, there's an element of like, we were talking about it in the review before about Drake's thing. When you go from mixtape to very successful mixtape, therefore successful artist on the up and up, to making an album, everything that you've been trying to work towards, you're on the way to already achieving. So in your mind, things are already sort of changing. The things that you're exposed to are a little bit changing. If you've never traveled to Dubai before when you're in mixtape mode, but you've done 5 trips to Dubai to tour your thing, naturally the perspectives that you have is going to change. But it goes without saying, like, the best artists are able to slowly walk the fans through that transition as well.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you don't want to alienate your listeners, like going from the J. Cole I was trying to bust to like I've bust now and I'm like buying all of the expensive clothes. Not that J. Cole ever said that stuff, but you have to walk your fans through it. But yeah, man, in your mind, like, if things change, if your tax bracket changes, if you go from having like a barber that you have to queue for to a barber who flies out to you wherever you are in the middle of the world, it's a different kind of life. Like, you got to talk about it.
It makes sense.
And really and truly, I think a lot of the people that we consider legends from that era, if they were to do a debut album, which a lot of them didn't. I mean, I think Squeeks is in prison now. Like, a lot of them couldn't.
Is he out?
I think he's still. I don't know, but I think he might still be. I don't know if any of them could have made that leap, really and truly, for a bunch of reasons. Obviously, the type of content they were making, maybe they were too real with it, and maybe labels didn't want to touch them, or maybe we were still in an era where it wasn't really like road rap and that kind of dangerous rap in comparison to like what was out at the time wasn't as attractive.
They didn't want to touch it, man.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't want to touch it.
As much as they were like revolutionary in a sense, unfortunately they kind of boxed themselves in as well. I mean, without even knowing it, probably. So I don't know how many of them could have actually made the transition, but yeah, I mean, the mixtape to album transition is a hard one. Like, Krept and Conan are good examples of people who actually did it and did it well and successfully. But I think in the UK especially, they're very rare, I'd say.
Do you think the golden era as well kind of limited or allowed certain artists to become limited as far as what they would aspire for? Because I think with a lot of these artists, they got used to making street albums and never really elevated beyond that point. But do you see that as a good or bad?
No, I think that's good.
Because it's another way to eat. You can constantly feed your core, give them what they want, and still be making money from that. Some people don't really have to aspire to.
There you go. That for me is the key of this, right? Like, some people just want to be in their lane and stay in their lane. You know what I mean? And that's okay, because as I said, I go to artists for specific things. I mean, rarely do I go to one artist for everything. You know what I mean? So I need to every now and again, like back in the day, go to a Blade Brown album, like, for a specific thing, for a specific mood. So yeah, no, I think that's a good thing. I think artists being true to themselves, it'd look a bit funny if certain artists were like trying to differ dramatically from what they're what their sort of strengths are, we'd be able to tell in the music pretty quickly, and then they'd be open for more criticism, right? In the most critical genre in history.
Either that or they'll change it. Yeah, either that or
people staying in their line is great.
yeah, either that or if they want to transition, they'll change up their sound. Like Tion was doing road rap, and now he does drill with a mix of like kind of UK rap-esque stuff. Nines, he's pretty much been doing the road rap thing, but he's a similar thing to Krypton Kona, where it's kind of just been on an upward curve rather than a sudden jump.
Fredo as well.
Fredo as well.
Nines did it really well though.
Nines did it well.
He did it really well.
The jury's still out on Pot of Paper because Pot of Paper hasn't released his debut album yet.
I think he's always going to be in the hole, man.
You reckon? We'll see. We'll see.
Whenever I listen to Pot, I just feel like if anyone's going to find it tough, I don't know why, I just feel like Potter's going to find it.
Yeah, why?
See. Just because.
Well, I mean, Gangsteritis is like one of the
yeah.
biggest tunes of like the year or last year, and that was kind of like, it wasn't road rap or anything. It was just like Tiggs the Author just singing his ass off and Pop
what
just
it is though? I
rapping.
just feel like
So I think he could probably
the more I
do it.
believe you, the more like with Pot I believe. Not saying I don't believe the rest because I do, but with him it's like I can see you getting in trouble. Do you know what I mean? It's just like it's a little bit more danger with people actually.
Well, it's like with Nines as well.
True.
Because he's
Mo
been in that.
wants to visit his favorite rappers in the clink.
No. I don't wish.
No, he
You really want
does.
you want to do visitations
I
of
don't
your
wish,
favorite
I don't
rappers?
wish prison
Believability.
I don't wish prison on any of my rappers. Don't do that. I definitely don't do that.
Nah, of course.
I want believability. Shoot me.
Without the
No, you're not shoot.
without the golden era of like the road rap mixtapes, because obviously at the time like the scene was dark. What do you think happens?
How many times do you want to say that?
It was dark though, bro. But what do you think happens? Because I feel like that energized the scene, man. Before we got the German whips and that, man, like these road rappers were carrying shit, bro. Let's keep it a buck.
No, they
What
were.
happens without
Was
that?
German Whip like a moment?
Yeah.
In history?
No,
Yeah,
German Whip-
really though.
yeah, bro. At
was
the
a-
time,
You
yeah, man.
mentioned it a few times.
No, because
At
it
the
was
time,
a
man.
grime
It's what
tune
you
that
said,
made
though.
it back into the charts
I
like,
know.
and a high position.
But
and
was
that's
it a
when-
grime
Bro,
tune,
it was
really,
dark,
though?
bro.
No, it was dark.
What
It
was
was a
Tinchy
yo.
doing,
There was a
bro?
there was a
What was
period.
Skep doing? What was
There was a
Wiley?
period.
It was
Oopsie
dark,
Daisy.
bro.
There was a period where it was just dark, man. But I think it's what you said. They brought the authenticity back, and I think because they brought the authenticity back in the culture, everyone just started swaying towards that. If that makes sense.
What do you think happens if we don't even get that? What if we don't get
Honestly,
the Joe
then
Blacks
your
and the
boy
Blaze
is
Browns?
Oopsie
and that?
Daisy for the next 6 years, bro.
Oh, I don't know.
Oopsie Daisy and Eddie. Oh
I don't know.
my
I don't know.
god!
I reckon the natural cycle of music probably would have
It
dictated.
figures itself out.
Yeah, I reckon it would have figured itself out. Because did road rap really bust?
But we had a.
I think a lot of
It
rappers
was
that
underground and it remained underground. So did it really make an impact on the
Yeah.
mainstream?
Yeah, because
status?
I think it did.
we needed that alternate.
I think it did because a lot of rappers that are big today probably come from that. So without them, man, like energizing the scene or even, I guess, placing that sort of platform or forum there, I don't think a lot of the man that are like blowing today end up blowing.
So the big guys who we would sort of categorize
'Cause it gave
as sort
certain man
road
a
rap
lot of
today
confidence.
would be like what? Giggs, Tion Wayne, Hedy, who
Fredo.
else?
Fredo,
Fredo.
Potter.
So you think
Nines,
that them
Potter.
man are the legacy of the golden era, the second golden era? Is that what you're saying?
The second.
No,
Yeah.
I think you got to throw Joe Black in there, Blaze
Joe
Brown in
Black,
there.
Well,
K. Cole,
Young's
solely on a
Benny-
mainstream
Benny Banks.
level, yes.
K.
Solely
Cole,
on a
Benny
mainstream level,
Banks.
yes.
So you think that these men who are like big now, again, the Tions, etc., etc., you think
Headies.
that they are here because of that? second
I
golden
think
era?
They're here because of the Joe
yeah,
Blacks.
I would say so, man.
They're definitely here because of the Joe Blacks.
It's difficult to not give them that credit, bro.
You've got to give Joe Black his. He held
It's a favorite
it for
rapper.
Because
favorite
where we're
rapper,
gonna-
favorite rapper, favorite
They-
rapper.
Because
That's
other than
that's
what was
exactly
happening,
what
They influenced. I would say that they influenced style, but how can they have?
that's enough though.
Okay, right, maybe, but I wouldn't say that they were responsible for these guys blowing, or they didn't bust through the door, leave the door open for the likes of Tion and them man to come through after them.
No,
So
but
back to my
But
point
Joe
about-
they made a sound more acceptable.
Fam, what did Nas say? I gave him a style for them to run with.
What did you say?
Nas said I gave you man a style for you to run with. That's what them man did.
Yeah, but Nas went big. He
Yeah.
went big, so he was able to leave the door open.
No, but what I'm taking from that bar is that Nas came in the game with a certain style, and a lot of man kind of took from his style and used that to propel themselves.
Yeah, but the
that's
missing-
what I'm saying about Blade Brown, Giggs, and them man.
But the missing ingredient is that Nas's style shot to the moon. So he actually was sat at the biggest tables, at the pinnacles of the charts. So he was at a position where he could open the door up, and his style worked both on the underground and the commercial level. What I'm saying is with the golden era
Giggs
that
opened
we
the door.
speak about, I would agree with that.
Giggs opened the
I
door.
would agree with that. So whoever we consider to be the legacy of Giggs, or those who influenced Giggs in the same way Lil Wayne opened up the door for basically every rapper today, those are the people I would attribute to the success that we're having today more. I reckon the people like the Blade Browns, etc., they may have had an influence on people's style, for sure. But did they bust through the door to leave the door open for them man to blow? I'm
Yeah,
not
because
sure.
if they didn't do
Probably
it,
not.
they-
Probably
no,
not.
but then
I think it all
that
relates
would
back
have happened
to
to
people
Henny
like
and them lot
gigs.
is what happened to them lot.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? If
Yeah, I
you
think-
take away Blade Brown and everyone, and then Heady and them not start making road rap, all that's gonna happen now is Heady and them man are gonna be the first batch of road rap that don't go nowhere. The first batch is always gonna struggle
I
to
see
make
what
it
you're
through.
saying. That's a good point.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
So they had to do that, take the hits, and then when the second wave comes, it's
That's
a little bit more acceptable.
That's
now.
a very strong point.
The
Yeah,
first
for real.
batch is always gonna find it tough, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's like the cycle, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And without that generation, we might not have what drill is now.
Exactly that.
We might not have what,
So you're saying that
what,
them
what
man,
UK trap is now.
yeah, them man had to make the mistakes. No, I don't mean it in a pissy
Yeah.
way. Like them man had to sort of make the music, make it in a way that wasn't necessarily perfect for the scene, for the likes of Tion and them man to say, okay, it's this part of your music which works.
Exactly that.
That part of your music
It's
that doesn't
exactly
work,
that,
I'm gonna
yeah.
leave that out.
And then mix it all.
Yeah.
Exactly
Yeah.
that. It's
I get
exactly
that.
that. It's exactly
100%.
that.
100%.
I get that. I get that.
I mean, it's hard to imagine the UK without that era, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
It would have been.
I don't know if grime.
So important, man.
Yeah, I don't know if grime comes back with the same kind of intensity.
Nah. Look how dark.
Maybe
Peter
it comes
says
back earlier. Who knows?
Look how dark Peter said it was.
Dark.
It's similar to what was happening in America around the 2000s, man. Everything was glossier. There's a lot of dance shit, and then if you had 50 on the underground doing the mixtape shit, that was important for what New York needed around that time because of what was happening on the mainstream. Road rap here is the equivalent of that to me.
I hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's very valid as well.
You can see the mirror images between the timelines in America and UK.
But look, man, it's got to be said that, and you started off by saying that, like, speaking about history, it needs to be done. Like, somebody needs to, or a group of people, group of rap fans, need to do this UK hip hop / grime / drill, like, family tree. Like, I know
he's
you've been
trying to
talking
do it,
about it needs to be done because it's so difficult. It's so difficult to really, especially because of how not advanced internet was at the time it was popping, and how, you know, because it was an underground UK scene, much of what you find out about the industry is in like forums, like grime and hip hop forums, right? And that doesn't really work in search engines. Like, we need somebody to do the links. They need to link it all.
Yeah,
because,
I agree.
Because this UK hip hop, UK rap, UK garage, UK grime story is just so
mad, you know?
mad. It's so layered. Like, it's so mad, and it's like not just about London. It's Brum. It's like it's Manchester. It's everything, right? And we need that to happen because that, I think, will actually make it easier for labels and radio and the like to really understand that this is a culture. The reason why America is or hip hop rappers are so successful in America is because America ultimately, even if they've got their problems with black people and racism, etc., they've accepted that hip hop is a culture. Right? And there's less questions that are asked about why a guy rocks up to the record label offices with tattoos all over his face and multicolored dreads and stuff. They just understand that this is the culture. Here, we still have people who don't understand what they're looking at because they don't understand where it's come from. So someone needs to do that. Like, we need that family tree.
There you go, Pete. If you ever need more
Got a job in your hands, man.
I'll help with it. Like,
No,
I
I
think
said I was
it just
gonna
needs
come
to be
to you as well.
done.
Yeah,
I think it's
I
done.
think it's starting again. Salute to Mike Check. They did the history on this era. They've also done a piece about UK classic albums as well, from like the 80s to now. So I think it's starting. It's starting, but yeah, we're definitely a long way out from it. But you know, conversations like these are only gonna revive that kind of.
We need more documentaries. Like, we need more. We need it all. Like,
We just need more see people talking about our culture.
Yeah,
Something
like,
know where you come
100%,
from.
man.
And how you end
But
up
with
here.
that, on the documentary front, I think some of the artists in question, I mean, I only say this because of Chip, being sensitive when that Link Up TV documentary went out that I was in. And it basically got taken down because he didn't like the way he was basically being portrayed.
How was he portrayed?
I think there was some kind of like drawing of him with in bed with like a lyric book, and he was in the shower, and there was some kind of I don't think he liked that. So they basically took it down, put it back up, took it back down again. So if we're gonna do that, artists, be less sensitive, and documentarians don't be as insulting either. So there needs to be that level as well. 'Cause, you know,
yeah, London's still. Don't get yourself
Pete's
beat
always
up.
respectful.
Chip will pull up.
Yeah,
on
don't
you.
get
These
yourself
people
beat
will pull
up.
on
Yeah,
you.
yeah, don't get
These
yourself
people
beat
will
up
pull
over no
on you,
doc.
for sure.